Katy,
Not that there are any of our colleagues that we can't stand.
Katy, is all as well as our MPs would have us believe?
Yeah, I'm sure I can name some. Yeah, I mean, I think if we're saying the Conservative Party after Brexit, I mean, first off, it still feels as though Brexit is ongoing. And you can see that in the sense that we've been having debates in the past few months in Parliament about EU retained law rule and the Windsor framework. So it's an ongoing process. And I think that it's interesting if you chart, I suppose, the way these disagreements within the Tory party and the coalition within the Tory party manifest themselves. It feels we're a long way from the EU referendum. Obviously, a lot of this is down to mathematics, parliamentary arithmetic, but you have a situation by which I think the ERG is a diminished force compared to where it was in 2017, where you effectively need to know every member of the ERG to work out what was going to happen in British politics. And if they didn't like it, that was going to hold the Tory party together, and that'd be a problem. Whereas it feels as though we now have a situation where the majority in government are Brexiteers. Now, we have a hierarchy, depending who you speak to, of who is the truest Brexiteer. But I think when you have a prime minister who is a Brexiteer, you have not a chancellor this time, but obviously, a foreign secretary. Go down the list. Kemi Badenoch, who is obviously the business secretary, who chose to actually scrap the plan to fast forward all the retained law scrapping. It makes it a bit more, I think, complicated to say, oh, this is a true Brexit view rather than this. And I think if we look at probably the turmoil in the Tory party since the EU referendum, I think to echo some of the comments already made, a lot of it comes down to the fact there was no unity, as Liam was saying, as to what Brexit meant for the Tory party as a whole, and everyone had different ideas. So you had some who actually thought more accountability, no longer blaming Brussels for lots of things. Actually, probably seeing it now, we can blame failures of the UK, of the nation state. And then you also had some MPs who saw it as a way to raise welfare standards. I remember writing about the Waitrose protectionists versus the Lidl free marketeers quite early into the Boris Johnson government, which didn't land well with everyone. Not everyone enjoyed Waitrose protectionist as a term, but it was briefed to me. Somebody was frustrated, but that was about how you saw things like a UK-US trade deal. And I think that was a really interesting one because it was two groups of Brexiteers within the Tory party with very different ideas about what you should be doing with the Brexit trade policy. And it was things like this that I think were slightly brushed aside during the EU referendum. So it suddenly became a debate about what exactly Brexit was to different factions and who would win, as opposed to, I think what probably made the argument for leaving in of itself a bit easier was because everyone agreed on the end goal. You thought you can get to those bits after. And I think that's what we spent the past few years going through. And now it feels to me, I mean, I suppose we can talk about public opinion, but at least the Tory party is in a bit more of an assured place, partly because it was just an unavoidable weakness for Theresa May from a position of authority to back Remain. It just meant it constantly could be thrown back at her, rightly or wrongly. And I think now having had Boris Johnson, but also Rishi Sunak, which some Brexiteers do not think is, did not see him as hardcore as Boris Johnson, even though I think you look at some of the actions you could disagree with that, does just mean I think you now have a more self-assured Tory government in terms of what they want to do with it. But obviously, I think the slight elephant in the room is what has the Tory party done on Brexit so far? I was speaking to a former senior figure in the government who said they weren't sure what you could point to by the time of the next election. So I think the Tory party actually is slowly making peace and has got on a journey here. But as for convincing, the public that this is going well and all those things, I think there's still some work to do.